Welcome to Ellis B. Feaster's Radio Air Check and Classic TV channel.
All this day could not go by without the frequent mention of a guy who was probably more responsible for your listening habits in the last 20 years than anybody else, Mr. Rick Sklar, who is one of the certified, bona fide geniuses of programming. It's my pleasure to have worked with him for many, many years, and Rick evidently had a couple of words to say.
And
yes?
This is Rick Sklar. During the 12 years that I programmed WABC radio, you were my biggest star. People would ask me, how do you handle a Dan Ingram? How do you give direction to such a highly rated DJ? It can't work. But you and I know that it did work. It was my job to keep the station on top, and you always outperformed the other programs. I think it was your sense of humor that got those extra ratings. But with that sense of humor, you always had both of us just one step ahead of the lawyers. Whether it was the toll collectors who sued when you explained the system of pocketing quarters up to a 5% weekly overage, or the People's Republic of China that protested when you accused them of substituting your laundryman for Chairman Mao, or the Indian tribe that went after you for your Tonto impersonation, or the general outcry when you faded down Stevie Wonder and said, "Over here, Stevie, you're singing into a telephone pole." You always managed to offend somebody, Dan, but it sure brought in the ratings. Dan, I wish you even bigger ratings in the next 20 years.
Thank you, Rick. Don't say another 20 years. I don't think I could take it. That's Rick Sklar. It was so nice of him to record that at the plate now, and I really appreciate it. That's right, I did say all those things. I'm so ashamed of myself. Well, back in the year 1966, there was a different kind of feeling about war and stuff like that, and the number one record of that year comes up in just a second.
77 WABC. Dan Ingram.
Fighting soldiers from the sky have been winning the Green Beret.
Well, that was the number one tune that year, and I guess a lot of people still feel the same way about the brave men who fought for this country. You can't fault them for that. It's time now for news, real news to get you updated, and real traffic with the real Joe Nolan. Coming up next, more of our 20th anniversary show. We'll have the number one tune of 67. That'll be coming up right after the news.
WABC, Action Central.
I'm Rick James. It's 76 degrees, but what the heck, we'll call it 77 at WABC, New York's radio station.
The most music on
77 WABC.
ABC, New York.
That's good to hear that again. I've missed the staff announcers. They're some of the great men of the industry. That was John Cosell, George Ansborough, George Hayes, and so many of the other guys who were just so. When I walked in here, and I remember once when George Ansborough came in to do the news on my show, because staff men did the news in those days. I mean, he was one of my heroes. I mean, what an honor it was to have a man of that stature, and all the other guys too, who are such great talents. That's part of the fun of the early days here. You remember this thing?
Happy 20th anniversary
Oh, that's the wrong thing.
to you. Happy 20th anniversary to you. 20 years of Dan Ingram on WABC.
Well, that's nice. You fooled me. We were about to play the record that was the number one record of way back in 1967. Remember this? Right. You remember who sang it? I used to call her Ul Ul, because it sounded better that way. This is To Sir With Love, Lulu. truth be known, I never liked that record. I mean, and let's face it, you can't love them all, and that may be your all-time favorite record. If it is, I apologize, but it just never really turned me on. For a long time here at WABC, the guy who did the afternoon news was a very talented, very astute man who now works for the network and makes a lot of money, a guy named Bob Hart. We always used to do thin jokes about Bob. You know, Bob Hart was sitting in a sports car the other day and got shifted into fourth gear. Bob Hart is so thin it says Eberhard Faber, number 2, up one side of his body. Bob Hart is so thin he stepped on a tack the other day and looked like a lowercase T coming down the street, upside down. Anyway, Bob Hart has had a few words to say, and I'd like to hear what they are.
Hi there, Dan, and happy 20th anniversary from the man who used to do the Action Central Newsy-Doos during the Ingram thing. I'm Bob Hart, stepping out of my role as mild-mannered ABC Network news correspondent, and remembering that day in January of 1968 when, fresh in from Detroit and with butterflies in my stomach, I made my New York radio debut with you. Within a matter of weeks, you'd succeeded in removing the butterflies, breaking me up on the air, and giving me a title I still get hit with every now and then, World's Skinniest Newsman.
When we last left Bob Hart, he was trapped on the top of a mountain by an evil lion who was about to eat him. Even though there wasn't much, he was a very hungry lion. Bob, however, had his magic The gun was capable of annihilating anything. So he pointed his gun at the lion, and we heard...
In WABC News headlines, Governor Rockefeller is reportedly firing Frank Aikman as president of the Long Island Railroad. A Black Panther spokesman says there was no plot to free 21 Panthers jailed for an alleged plot to bomb department stores. Right now, 74 degrees and cloudy. Full news. At 55.
Wonderful. Leave Bob alone, please. It's barely a toothache. They couldn't do anything for it. Go ahead.
And, Dan, you'll be happy to know that I haven't gained a pound since then.
Yeah.
So I guess I can still keep the title World's Skinniest Newsman for a while. And I can still put a red yarmulke on my head and go to a masquerade party as a matchstick. And though I've moved on to other assignments, I still have fond memories of my 11 years working with you in the good old days at WABC. It's always nice to work with a pro, and I did. Happy 20th, Dan, and may you have 20 more if you want them.
Mercy. Bob Hart, a true gentleman in this business and a very talented guy, and I'm glad he's doing so well. It's good to hear from him again. We used to always kid Bob. As a matter of fact, I remember one time, this was the intro, as I recall.
Now, once again, the famous Viennese authority and champion varmint shooter of DeKalb Avenue, Bob Hart, will do Action Central News while standing on one finger, whistling Yankee Doodle through his earlobe underwater in the men's room of the Mills Hotel while being attacked by a herd of Elvis Presley fans who heard that he didn't like the old man.
News briefs 5 minutes sooner from WABC, New York. This is Bob Hart.
We used to have a thing with Bob. We used to take him along. If we ever dropped any change and it went through a grating, we'd put a little chewing gum on his head. Just stick him down in there. And then we found out he could open his mouth and just pick up the coins anyway, so it was saved on chewing gum. Thanks, Bob Hart, for being part of the show. We got the #1 record of 1968 for you. And I guess I can say this. I don't think that the word I'm going to use will really frighten any young people, and certainly older people will know what I'm talking about. But someone asked me a long time ago what I thought were the real qualifications for being a disc jockey. And I said then, as I say now, the only real qualification for being a disc jockey is you must be able to defecate in less than 3 minutes. If you can do that, you got it beat. Now, this record changed all that. It made life so easy. This has been called the Bathroom Blues, a toilet tune, but it's Hey Jude, the #1 record of 1968, 6 minutes and 42 blessed seconds long.
Hey Jude.
It's almost late. There's no paper about there. One of the all-time greats. Well, they'll do the jingle. We're playing old jingles today, too.
He's in!
Big Dan.
He's on!
I never told you what I was on either. I never was, really. That's one thing I never got into. But anyway, one of the all-time great talents in broadcasting, showbiz, sports, singing, everything, is the one and only Howard Cosell. And Howard once sang a song so well that I had to play it for you before you get a chance to talk to him.
I'm living today. I wanna be a part of it. New York, New York.
Howard, please.
Hello.
Hello, Howard. Howard Cosell is out in the Hamptons somewhere and on the phone, I understand. Howard, are you there?
I am here, Dan. Do you read me?
I read you loud and clear, sir.
You had the audacity to play that song.
Well, you're one of the big all-time singing stylists.
I tried that on Saturday nights, and I got canceled.
Howard, I must tell the people that when the Mets were on WABC, you and Ralph Branca used to do the pre- and post-game shows. And while you were downstairs in the newsroom gathering up sports information for the closing show, me and Branca would be playing gin rummy. Ralph Branca has several $1,000s of my money to this day. I think his success in the insurance business because of that.
If he does, you're the only one he ever beat.
Well,
listen, I'm just delighted about your 20th anniversary. My congratulations. And you bring up Big Ralph number 13, Branca, and the Mets pre- and post-game shows. Those were some of the happiest days of my life because the Mets were even worse then than they are now, and you and I used to sing the Mets theme song, remember?
Sure did.
The Mets are really sucking the ball.
Right.
Well, by God, there came a day when little Hobie Landreth hit a home run off Warren Spahn, and the sports writers were transfixed for a decade.
Yes, I remember. Do you still play gin rummy as well as you used to?
Probably the best player in the land because of my total recall.
You do.
Hey, you did one of the nicest things I've ever heard earlier.
What's that?
You paid tribute to some of the greatest men in the history of our industry, the staff announcers.
They sure were great.
I began before I even knew you, Dan, and I'd like to add to what you said.
Go ahead.
People like Dorian St. George and Doug Browning and Charlie Woods and John Cosier, whom you mentioned, and George Hayes, whom you mentioned. The amount of help they were to me when I came in as a neophyte couldn't be measured. In fact, as much as anybody, they made it possible for somebody like me to even begin to sound professional. So I thank you, sir, on this occasion of your 20th anniversary for remembering them.
Thank you, Howard. Thank you for talking with us. It sounds like you're having a good time. You're out there in the Hamptons someplace?
Yes, my summer home, and I've got 4 grandchildren really socking the ball.
Well, that's great.
Hey, listen, you're a pro. You're big, Dan, and I mean you're big. And you don't survive 20 years and continue to prosper. You don't have that kind of longevity and durability in so perilous a business as ours if you're not the best there is at what you do. Which you are. Congratulations, old friend.
Thank you, my friend. Good talking to you.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Yeah, that's kind of nice coming from Howard Cosell because I consider him to be one of a kind. I always think of Howard in terms very similar to the way people used to think of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. There were a lot of people who loved FDR and there were a lot of people who didn't. But yet he kept on going, and Howard keeps on going too. He's a unique, brilliant man. If you don't know him personally, maybe you don't know that Howard is even smarter than he tells you he is. He really is. Wonderful guy. We got the record that I played one before, the one that I didn't like. Well, I'm going to play the one that I did like out of all these number one tunes. This is my favorite. Yeah, back in 1969. The year of hope in music that year. Just tuned into WABC and are saying, so what the hell's going on? This is my 20th anniversary show. I'm Dan Ingram, and the honor group of the day. Oh my goodness, they just walked in with oh my, would you look at that? This is an Atwater Kent radio, super heterodyne, and it says presented to Dan Ingram. Another day, another dollar. The music's on us, the joke's on you. WABC, a radio station on the occasion of his 520th bi-monthly paycheck. I love it. As New York's #1 radio personality by the A-Team, Harry Lang, Win Lloyd, Saul Rockman, Bob Deitch, George Berger, Bill Moser, Jim McGuire, Gene Maxwell, Kiki Hooper, Frank D'Elia, George Musgrave, and Rick James. Now, isn't that nice? Thank you, gentlemen. I applaud you with one single applause. That's very nice. That is absolutely beautiful. Oh, that is that mine, or did you just read it? And Atwater, does it work and everything?
Yeah.
If I turned it on now, could I listen to myself and go home? That is beautiful. It's one of those old, since this is radio, I'll describe it. It's one of those old-fashioned kind of pyramid-shaped radios. What do you call it?
Cathedral radio.
Cathedral-shaped. That's it. Cathedral radio. It's an Atwater Canton. It's for real.
We got it from the guy that makes the phone system.
The guy that makes the phone system, Mr. Marconi. Oh, that is absolutely wonderful. And a nice, beautifully engraved plaque. Gee, guys, that's wonderful. That means as much to me as... now, you may not know this, but I'll tell you something at home. I have I wear earphones. No, it's a single phone. It's a very old earphone. And the reason thank you. The reason I wear a single earphone is because when I first started in radio, there was a guy named George Chandler, who was the chief engineer at WALK in Patchogue, Long Island. He said, he was from Maine. He said, anybody wears 2 earphones falls in love with their own voice. And I wear one, and I've always worn one. It's an old, cheap one, and it sounds lousy, and I like it that way. But 5 years ago, the folks around here who really count, the engineering staff, got together and got me a gold jack for my earphones. It's the only one I know of in radio, and I use that all the time, and I use it every day, and this means at least as much, if not considerably more than that. Thank you, guys. Really, that's wonderful. I'm touched. I was about to say something facetious, but I can't do that. There is one thing I wanted to play for you. There was a promo on, which is the first time I ever came across the music I now use as my closing music, and I've used since then. This was called the Gasser ID, and it ran for, I think, 14 years off and on the station, and it sounded like this.
WABC, serving New York and America with music in tempo with today. You latched on to Radio 77, WABC, the swinger in New York town, the only station with young ideas for New York.
Yeah, that was fun to do that kind of radio. We're doing this kind of radio now, which is kind of a retrospective as what's been happening. And Rick James, who has been diligently digging up what happened in the past this year with another 5-year budget of goodies that happened. Where were we, 71, I guess?
Ready for 71. A controversy began April 20th of that year. That would continue through the decade, continues even today. The U.S. Supreme Court in 1971 ruled unanimously that the courts could order the busing of school students to achieve racial balance in schools. On the 3rd of May, the anti-Vietnam War protest would reach yet another high as thousands of anti-war militants arrived in Washington, D.C. Attempting to disrupt the business of government, they said. The Nixon administration vowed that would not happen. 12,000 arrests were made. Most of those arrested were later released. This year, 1971, was the year when 18-year-olds received the right to vote as the 26th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was implemented. At the UN, another controversy there, Communist China was admitted as a member. On to 1972, New Yorkers began a restoration project at the South Street Seaport. In February of 1972, President Nixon made an unprecedented trip to mainland China. In another move that remains controversial to this date, the British assumed direct rule of Northern Ireland in 1972. It would be a political explosive year, as we would learn later. It was also another year for political violence as gunshots felled Alabama Governor George Wallace as he campaigned for president in Laurel, Maryland, May 15th, leaving him paralyzed for life. On June 17th of 1972, some men broke into the Democratic National Committee's Washington headquarters. It was located in a Washington building known as Watergate. In September, the tragedy of Munich, terrorists killing 11 members of Israel's Olympic team. In 73, the year New Yorkers dedicated the World Trade Center, the world's tallest buildings, for just a very short while. President Richard Nixon began his second term. After a huge landslide win over Senator George McGovern, the Nixon supporters had chanted 4 more years. That wasn't to be. By April 30th of that year, Mr. Nixon was on television accepting responsibility for the Watergate break-in, but not the blame. Gone from his administration as of that date, H.R. Haldeman, John Ehrlichman, and John Dean. On October 10th of 73, Vice President Spiro Agnew resigned because of separate allegations against him for political corruption. 10 days later, on October 20th, 1973, the Saturday Night Massacre sees the firing of Special Watergate Prosecutor Archibald Cox and the resignations of Attorney General Elliot Richardson and his deputy William Ruckelshaus. 1973 also sees Indians taking hostages at Wounded Knee, South Dakota, King Constantine expelled from Greece, a military coup in Chile that kills President Allende, and the biggest Arab-Israeli war, which begins with an attack on Israel on Yom Kippur. Later, Egypt and Israel will sign a ceasefire accord negotiated by the U.S. 74. In New York, veteran politician Abe Beame takes office as mayor of New York City. He's a Democrat. He has realized his dream of a lifetime, not realizing the dream will become a nightmare as the house of cards comes tumbling down. On February 5th of the year 1974, we start talking about Patty Hearst. She's kidnapped by the Symbionese Liberation Army. The political stove is really cooking in Washington now. On July 30th, 1974, the House Judiciary Committee adopts 3 articles of impeachment, charging President Nixon with obstruction of justice, failure to uphold laws, and refusal to produce material subpoenaed by that committee. On August 8th, 1974, more history. President Nixon tells a nationwide TV and radio audience he'll resign at 12 noon the next day. On August 9th, Gerald Ford becomes President of the United States. Mr. Ford perhaps undoes himself politically less than a month later, as he announces a full, free, and absolute pardon for Mr. Nixon.
I have Mr. Nixon's resignation on videotape at home. I play it a lot.
Mr. Nixon's resignation led to my firing from a very good job, but that's a different story.
No, tell me about it. You want to tell me about it?
Well, I think you know the story.
I do, but the people out there don't. Would you rather just let it go?
No, I don't care. I worked at a radio station in Chicago and had a semi-management job.
Yeah.
The news director happened to pick that day to be out of town. The general manager walks in, and he says, now this was a rock and roll station, unlike WABC. He says, you know we're in the sweeps, which means ratings.
Right.
He says, is, and I quote him, Tricky going to quit tonight? I said, yeah, I think so. He says, we don't mention it on the air here until after midnight. I don't care what you want to do. You can tape the resignation, play it back at midnight.
Because of the ratings.
Because of the ratings. He says, if those turkeys, referring to his listeners, hear the president's resigning, they'll switch over to the old news station.
Oh, Lord, really?
I don't know. One of the few times in my life I rose to a moment of principle and said I wasn't going to put out any such memo. If he wanted to put out, he could. He did. I was bumping overnight news immediately thereafter.
Oh, Lord. Well, congratulations. I respect you for that.
I made it 1975. The year begins with the conviction in Washington federal court of former Attorney General Mitchell, White House aides H.R. Haldeman, John Ehrlichman, Robert Mardian on charges of covering up the facts of Watergate. May 15th, Cambodia seizes the American merchant ship Mayaguez. President Ford orders a military operation to recover it. The operation succeeds, but 38 U.S. servicemen die in the effort. June 5th, 1975, the Suez Canal reopened for the first time in 8 years since that 6-day war. During the year 1975, 2 attempts will be made on the life of President Ford, both involving handguns, both would-be assassins female. The president escapes unharmed both times. September of this year, Patty Hearst, now a fugitive, is captured by the FBI. By late summer of 1975, the House of Cards collapses in New York City. We're on the verge of bankruptcy. I guess I have to mention March 30th. A newsman who just a short time before been out of work arrives in New York.
Oh, yes.
Debuts on this station. Who knows what happened to the guy? And,
he's sitting in your pants.
So that's him. You know, I still feel bad because I've got 2 headphones.
That's right. You're wearing 2 earphones. I didn't realize it.
But I do want to say
voices are.
I do want to say something that you don't know. You're responsible. For my news career. And you say, how's that possible?
Well, I will say, how's that possible? Because I don't think I'm responsible for anybody. You got the talent to do it.
Well, I thought I had the talent to be a disc jockey. That's how I started in the business.
That's funny. I started doing news.
And back then I had this silly notion, if you can't be the best, you might find something else to do. Unfortunately, I'd never heard the Ray Taylor tape, but
Oh, Lord, they played that earlier. It was awful.
I came to New York, heard Big Dan Ingram, and thought, no way, kid, find yourself another way to do it.
Come on.
That's all true.
Oh, that's funny.
That's all true.
Well, we're up to 74, and you have more goodies coming up. Is the Shadow still available? Is he on the horn there?
Only one
way to find out. Let's open up at the Shadow and see if Joe Nolan is there with Shadow Traffic.
Hello.
Hello.
Does Howard really listen?
Does Howard listen?
Right? I mean, does he? Because if he listens, he doesn't like me.
Why?
Because I've given him abuse a lot.
Oh, that's all right. Howard, you know, let me tell you something about Howard Cosell.
Go ahead.
He's smart enough to know that whatever you say about him, you're talking about him. And he loves it.
Oh, is he?
Howard's one of the smartest men I know.
Is he really?
Yeah, he'll tell you.
Really? Good.
And even if he didn't tell you, he is smart.
Northbound number 7 trains are express only. Willits Point to Woodside. Let's see. New York Conrail 517 Stamford canceled 183rd Street. Passengers will be 35 minutes late. The 432 will run express only to Mount Vernon West. And if you are going to be traveling out onto the Long Island Railroad, scattered 10-minute delays to say eastbound through Jamaica, and then they still have that 2, 3, 4, 5 thing out in Brooklyn because of that subway problem. So I am Joe Nolan with WABC Shadow of Traffic.
That's it, huh?
Yeah, that's it.
You're stealing the money today.
No, I got a phone call. Say keep it short.
You got a phone call that said keep In your
you
case,
want me to talk?
In your case, that's no problem. Okay. Joe?
Then what did you do? You're supposed to... How can you...
supposed to be sanguine right now, right?
I know. I said such nice things about you before.
You're a good person, and I think you have a wonderful future ahead of you.
Thank you, sir.
I really mean that.
Well,
I do.
coming from you, there's hope.
Well,
you say that.
there's always hope in this business. Look, I'm still here for 20 years, and I've been thinking this is going down the tubes any minute for a long time.
Really?
Okay, all right?
Yes, sir.
That Shadow Traffic will catch you in the news block, which will be coming up at its usual time with Howard Cosell and Rick James and all that. But in the meantime, we have, they have one of our little anniversary jingles.
Ingram 20th. Congratulations there, WABC.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love jingles like that. We had a jingle for Howard Cosell that we played just once on the air. It says, "The gifted one speaks here, WABC." Hi-ho. Unfortunately, Howard was listening. He's a wonderful guy. Anyway, the record that came in 1970 as the #1 tune is a tune that was rejected by 3 other singers before they finally took it to B.J. Thomas.
Raindrops are falling on my head.
That's good. That's raindrops keep falling on my head. And my mother is on the phone, who just called from Malvern, Long Island, where I grew up after we moved from Flushing to Malvern. And hello there. I'm not going to put you on the air because I don't have to pay you. But so you wanted to send a telegram and they couldn't send it today, and you called instead. Aw, you're a good mommy. Thank you. You're going to read it to me now, what you're going to send a telegram? Go ahead. Wait a second. I can't quite hear you yet. Could you say that again, please?
Hello, and congratulations on your 20th anniversary at WABC.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Best wishes for the next 20.
We're
prejudiced, of course, since we've loved you ever since the doctor said it's a boy.
You were worried I was going to be a girl?
No.
Well, you just gave your congratulations to me and a couple of million people on the air.
Oh, good.
Thank you for calling.
Okay, I didn't expect to get you.
I'll talk to you later on.
How wonderful.
Take care.
Oh, we love the program.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Well, isn't that nice? My mommy called. Now, if I could get my wife to call back because the phones are working now, I'd like to put her on the air because I know she's listening. Anyway, where were we? Oh, yeah, we were about to do this. Oh, that was spectacular. That was what you call part of a jingle. That's an edit. 18 minutes before 6 o'clock. That's the first time check I've done since 3 o'clock. I just realized. The temperature, I have no idea what temperature it is. It's cool in the studio, and wherever you are, we have something called What's an Ingram that's on this list here. We'll find out what this is.
Ingram 20th. Congratulations, Dan. WABC.
What do you think of Dan Ingram?
He's in charge of a mess, I think. He keeps saying it's a mess. Is that the guy?
Well, I guess he's the guy who plays music.
I talk no English.
Is it an animal? I don't know. He's a WABC guy. Dan Ingram.
What's a Dan Ingram? It's a fantastic cocktail.
An aborigine.
Sounds like a popsicle to me.
Sounds like a wristwatch.
Who is a great lover?
Folks, he's really one of the heavies.
He's a newscaster for ABC, isn't he? I think he comes on in the Lady in the Late Show. I think he's kind of crazy.
It's kind of balding up on top.
That Ingram, he may be a political figure.
Some new kind of soap.
I have him pictured as kind of a big guy.
Well, his voice sounds tall, dark, and handsome. He's probably short, dumpy, and fat.
Do you know how many years Dan's been at ABC?
30, I guess.
Happy anniversary, Dan, from WABC.
Okay. You don't want me to put you on the air? You really don't want to be on the air? You sure about that?
I really don't.
You really don't? Why? Why don't you want to be on the air, darling?
Oh, darling, please.
I think you sound great on the air.
Oh, and I love you too, sweetheart.
I love you, darling. Thanks for calling.
Bye, darling.
Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
I'm coming home. She's gone. Okay. I think I scared her. That's my wife, Jeannie. And later on in the show, about an hour from now, I have something to play that also has her on it, which I know she'll want to listen to because it was probably the highlight of my entire career. But that's about an hour from now. In the meantime, we have something that I haven't heard in so long, I've forgotten what it is, but I do remember the title. Let's hear it.
The Jackson 5, Litty Bitty Dirt Wilson, Pickett, Tina Carpenter, Gordon Temptations, the Partridge Family, Hit Music Radio, WABC.
It's so hard to talk that way. You know, you have to take a deep breath and put one finger in one nostril and keep putting it in and out of each nostril. One time on April Fool's Day, we had the day they fooled me by having me not on the air. About an hour later, Sammy Kaye walked in the station with a record he was plugging, and they put him on the air. And it got to be a thing. A year later, they did something else I've forgotten. But one year, I remember when, let's see, it was David Fry, and this was prior to all the Watergate stuff. And David used to do, and still does, a great imitation of then President Nixon. And this is what happened on April Fool's Day. I believe it was 67, was it? I forgot now. I forgot. 72, was it that late? 71, 70, somewhere around there, and this is what happened that day.
It's 4 minutes past 2, and it's April Fool's Day on the Ingram thing, and I guess that's about it.
Abby, it won.
Here we go again.
And now the end is near, and so I face the final curtain. My friend, I'll say it clear. I'll state my case, of which I'm certain.
I guess he got my telegram. That was David Fry imitating our beloved. It's 7 minutes past 2 on the Ingram. That's what happened on the air that day. And then David came in and we talked for a little while, and it was kind of fun. He's an awfully nice guy and a very talented guy. It was nice to bring that back. We've had a lot of crazy things happen on the air, but we'll be getting to more of that stuff. In the meantime, coming up next, we have the number one tune of 1971.
WABC's Dan Ingram.
Anything else, or is that it? Oh, okay. We got on the phone with us right now a chap who was my engineer for a long time and is now the founder, owner, creator, and general impresario of the Eventide Clockworks. He is known to me as the Evil Ox. He is known to you as Richard Factor. And Richard, how is the electronics business?
Absolutely wonderful.
That's good. I'm glad. Have you? This is the man who invented the Heen and the Hearn, which you may have remembered from. That's how he invented it, too. He used to be a trumpet player, it sounds like. Anyway, Richard, I'm glad you called to say hello. And what was the other... Oh, the time that you got what was called a harmonizer. And would you explain what a harmonizer is? That was another April Fool's Day thing.
Yeah, that is a pitch change device that makes people sound very, very funny indeed.
Make me sound like Mickey Mouse on the air.
Or backwards.
Right, or again, big voice I got. But anyway, you did that to me on the air, and I can't find the tape, and I know you got it someplace in your multi-faceted files. But I want to thank you for calling up and wish you continued good success with Eventide Clockworks, because it proves that there is life after WABC. Thank you, Richard.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Dan.
Good talking to you. Bye-bye. He was my engineer for a long time, and he's one hell of a nice guy, and I just wanted to put him on the air. I'm going to do right now my favorite jingle of all the jingles of all time that I ever played. This is for all the jingle freaks. I won't talk over it, and you always had somebody talking over it, so you never really knew what it sounded like. And this is my all-time favorite WABC jingle.
Let's go, 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 go.
I talked over it. I forgot to go in the end. Well, Jingle Freaks, I'm sorry. You'll have one little fluff from Ingram on top of that. They're out there recording them. It's time now to find out what's happening around the world and around the block. Check up on traffic. Rick James is here, who's doing a hell of a job today. Thank you, Rick. And we'll have the news. And then I'm going to have a record that was, let's see, which record was that? I believe it was the record from 1972. Yeah, it was the number one tune out of 1972. And after that, I'm going to play something for you that contains an obscenity. I almost got fired. I'll play that for you. That's coming up. But right now, this.
WABC, Action Central News.
Transit officials now believe that human error is the culprit in the crash of two number 2 IRT subway trains near the Utica Avenue station in Brooklyn this afternoon.
The most music on
77 WABC.
WABC, New York.
Ingram 20th. Congratulations, Dan.
Thank you, gang.
WABC.
20 years I've been here, and 20 years I've watched my sideburns get gray. And hair by agonizing hair. But I don't believe in the mirror. I think the mirror lies. I do think the mirror lies, because somewhere in my head I'm about, I used to be 18 for a long time. Now I'm somewhere around 29. You really want to know? I'm 46. I started here when I was 26, 20 years ago in 1961. And one of the things I wanted to say before I went any further in the show, I suppose more properly this belongs at the end, but there's some other things I want to do, is I would like to just take a moment to pay respect to the memory of a dear friend, the man who hired me in New York. And frankly, if you listen to the tape that I gave him from which he hired me, I'm amazed that he heard anything in there worth hiring, because I listened to it today, and it's pretty poor. The late Hal Neal. He's responsible for me being here. You're responsible for me staying here, but he's the guy who brought me in, gave me the latitude to do some things that, a lot of people wouldn't really like to have happen on their radio station in those days. He let me have a little bit of room to fool around with, and it made the difference, because I think the one thing that I did in those days that I like to think I do now is try to talk to you honestly and openly and say something that might be maybe a little hoo-hoo-hoo, but nothing that's going to hurt anybody. And he had the courage and, I guess, the foresight to let me do that. If it hadn't been for Hal Neal, I'd still be somewhere in Kansas City. Probably making a good buck and having a good time, but not at this level. Hal, wherever you are, I love you. You are my friend. Thank you. Now let's go back to 1972. That's Gilbert O'Sullivan, the number one tune in 1972 on WABC.
WABC's Dan Ingram.
I always felt that WABC's Dan Ingram meant that I was in the clutches of this station somehow. They almost did once. They got mad at me for this, and I'm going to play it again because I think we can say this on the air. At least I hope we can. Ever since Archie Bunker started saying G's instead of G and hell and damn and all those words, well, I think I'm over my hell and damn quotient for the hour. I better cool it. I'm only about one. But I'll tell you the story of this, and you'll hear it again. And this is what happened on the air because I goofed and said what I was trying not to say. See, the thing was you weren't supposed to say that word, which, well, it had to do with fecal matter. And I was in my agent's office, and there was a lady who has since passed away, bless her soul, named Meryl Pecker, and she did auditioning for commercials. And we were sitting there talking to each other, and the joke was nobody's named Meryl, which was supposedly funny, you know, those cynical people in showbiz. And then I said to myself, well, what happens if Meryl Pecker married Joe Cocker? She'd be Meryl Pecker Cocker. And then I said, how about if she married the heir to the Smucker's Jam fortune? She'd be Meryl Pecker Cocker Smucker. And it went on like that. It was all very funny and very innocent and kind of risque, but not, you know, nothing really out and out bad. And that got on my mind as I was walking over here because my agent used to be on Madison Avenue. He's down on, he's the best agent in the world. His name is Don Buchwald, and if you're in the business and want a great agent, he's the guy who can get you to stardom because he's great. Anyway, I walked from his old office on Madison Avenue over to 6th. I was thinking about Smucker's Jam and Schick House Franks and other words like that, and this is what happened, and I blew it.
News before the hour, a service of ABC, the most music on WABC, New York.
WABC, Dan Ingram, go, go, go!
I had a what we call a nightmare last night, and I dreamt that we had feedback is what I dreamt. So we do. I dreamt that I got a commercial, and the manufacturers of Smucker's Jam and Schick House Meats and Schlitz Beer all got together and formed a corporation called the Schick House. I got it wrong, didn't I? I tried. Well, it's been a nice career.
I want to tell you, I got cold. And I hate to tell you where I got cold. But took a couple days, stuck my head in the next day, and when I came on the air, I did a whole bunch of tongue twisters just to prove I could do them. You know, like Theophilus Thistle, successful thistles, such as in sifting it simple of unsifted thistles, thrust 3,000 thistles through the thick of his thumb. See the down sifting a simple of unsifted thistles, thrust not 3,000 thistles through the thick of my thumb. Success to the successful thistle sifter. Well, I can say that, but I couldn't say... I'm not going to say it because I'll blow it. Well, let's move on in terms of music. Let's get up to 1973 and one of the prettiest number one tunes of all. Incidentally, I must remind you again, this weekend we're bringing you the songs that reached number one in New York all weekend long on New York's radio station, our number one song weekend. And this was the number one song of 1973.
ABC.
Drumming my baby with his fingers.
We're on the telephone right now with the man who has been somewhat responsible for my fortunes over the years. His name is Don Buchwald. And Don, you're on the air.
Oh, me?
You on right on the very electric radio theater, the Ingram thing.
I can't believe it. I'm really touched by this broadcast. You know, the accolades from all your fellow workers there and the whole thing. And I just want to say I really respect you now more than ever. And because of that, our company is going to reduce their commission to 10% starting Monday.
Wait a minute. You're only supposed to have been taking 10% all these years.
Oh, but I blew it.
Oh. Hey, Don, thanks for calling.
You're terrific.
Good talking to you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.